James tapped the microphone and said, "You're out, little brother." David smiled sadly. "Father protected you. The business cannot anymore." The hall watched as the lawyer folded the will without hesitation. My mother stared at flowers, pretending petals could hide our shame. I said, "If blood means nothing, remember this measureless vow." Laughter rolled across black suits like thunder finding metal rooftops too easily. The lawyer cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes like a guilty mirror. "No shares to Caesar Ewers," he read, "due to unsuitable temperament." James added, "You love ideas, not numbers. Our name needs numbers." I swallowed, tasting ash, then placed Father's pen back on the table. Perfume mixed with incense, grief mixed with gossip, my heartbeat mixed with drums. A cousin whispered, "Take the pity. Leave the scene with dignity." I said, "Dignity doesn't beg," though my voice trembled like wet paper. David reached for my shoulder, then chose his cufflinks instead. "It hurts now," he said, "but you'll thank us later." "I won't," I answered. "And later begins the moment you finish." People pretended to pray, counting drama like coins tossed in fountains. The lawyer signed papers while avoiding the family portrait behind him. Father smiled from the frame, eyes steady, mouth hiding weary secret. I held that gaze and felt heat return to my spine. Outside, winter light bent across the courtyard like a tired blessing. James followed, shoes clicking like small hammers against stone. "Walk away, Caesar," he said, before words sharpen into knives. I replied, "Words don't cut, they reveal." David lit a cigarette, smoke curling like careless handwriting. "You're a poet, not a manager," he said, shrugging. "Then I'll manage meaning," I said, "and let it manage me." James sighed, softening for a second only memory would remember. "We kept the factory alive," he said. "You stayed dreaming." "Dreams build machines," I said. "Fear just oils them." He looked away, perhaps hearing Father somewhere inside that sentence. The driver placed my bag beside the gate like a gentle verdict. Inside were notebooks, a spare shirt, and Father's threadbare scarf. The scarf still smelled like dye rooms, steam, and old stories. I wrapped it around my throat, armor against their chosen winner. "You could apologize," my aunt murmured, counting suns like sacred beads. "For what?" I asked. "For loving the work more than profit?" Her face tightened. Families prefer neat answers to untidy souls. I started walking, feeling the house watch me leave with relief. The city hummed, indifferent, as if fate had rehearsed this exit. My footsteps found rhythm faster than my heart found breath. I reached the street where factory trucks once felt like chariots. Their logos flashed past like old promises dressed as new pride. David's advertising hung from billboards, shining with renovated certainty. I remembered nights measuring warp counts while others boasted about margins. Father would tap my notebooks and say, "Textiles are patient stories." I believed him, even when the stories unraveled into warning. At a crossing, a bus splashed water across my dark suit. Strangers stared, and I laughed, because humiliation already finished her speech. The laughter tasted strange, like medicine I didn't expect to work. I kept walking, counting breaths, counting lights, counting ways to begin. At the riverside park, wind lifted the scarf like a flag. Children kicked a torn ball. A vendor sold tea with hope. I bought a cup and burned my lip, grateful for sensation. A boy asked, "Why are your eyes angry and brave?" "Because they're learning," I said, surprising us both into silence. I opened my notebook, drew looms, and wrote short prayers. "Weave with waste," I scribbled. "Stitch dignity into broken cloth." Father had notes about recycled weft. I remembered his gentle lecture. "The poor deserve beauty," he'd say, "not just cheap survival uniforms." I underlined that line twice, steadying my hand against the wind. Evening fell, turning the water black with patient, glittering eyes. I walked to the hostel near cranes and rail lines, groaning. The clerk said, "Bed shared, locker squeaks, blankets clean enough." "Clean enough will do," I said, counting my coins carefully. In the small room, men breathed like engines needing repair. I chose the top bunk, lay down, and stared upward. A crack ran across the ceiling like a carelessly stitched seam. I whispered, "Fate, you speak loudly, at least speak clearly." Somewhere outside, a horn wailed, and my throat stopped hurting. I slept hard like cloth resting before the final pressing. Morning rose stern and honest. Without music or family politics, I washed my shirt in cold water, wrung it like truth. Downstairs, newspapers screamed about profits, losses, and photo-ready sympathies. James's smile looked expensive. David's posture copied Father's taller shadow. I folded the paper carefully, as if folding yesterday into silence. The tea was thin, the bread dry, but hunger obeyed order. A dock worker asked, "You looking for lifting work or fast trouble?" "The first," I said, "and perhaps the second if wages refuse." He laughed, then pointed toward crates labeled with cotton bales. I followed him, placing hope beside simple, measurable movement. Work pounded my back and steadied my mind's flaring edges. The dock smelled like sweat, sea, and promises that kept shifting. I lifted, stacked, and learned the foreman's grudges by lunchtime. "You're new," he said. "New breaks faster." "I bend," I answered. "I don't break." He grunted approval, the rare coin in such places. My palms blistered, leaving small moons where softer past once lived. I liked the ache because it made thinking useful again. Each bale whispered possibilities. Each rope taught respect through burns. By dusk, I understood the weight honest beginnings must accept. After work, I returned to the river and counted colors. Old sari scraps floated near the bank, a quiet chorus of memory. I collected several, wrung them dry, and folded them carefully. 5 children gathered, curious, asking whether I was a collector. "I'm a weaver without a loom," I said, smiling. Their eyes widened like windows opening to unexpected weather. I promised them kites from leftover cloth when wind improved. They cheered, naming me Cesar Uncle without needing permission. I sat alone after, planning stitches across a city's wounded fabric. I felt small, scared, and finally pointed in a direction. Night swept the cranes, and the hostel hummed with tired snores. I wrote again. They ruined beginnings, not endings. Endings answer to work. The words steadied me more than blankets or thin mattresses. I pictured a stall near the river, selling cloth reborn beautifully. I sketched a label. "Ewer's Origins, woven from losses, worn with pride." That line felt right, like thread through a waiting needle. I closed the notebook and placed Father's scarf beneath my head. "I will rise through fabric, not fury," I whispered, almost sleeping. Fate didn't answer, but the river kept breathing for us. I slept with a vow stronger than their signatures. Inside me, loneliness became a roommate that never stopped humming. The hostel reeked of damp walls and forgotten ambition. My bunk creaked each time I shifted, counting the seconds until dawn. The men around me talked in snores and curses, their dreams louder than mine. I worked 12 hours at the docks, breathing salt, lifting crates, earning coins. My back stiffened, and my fingers blistered until they bled ink-colored pain. I ate bread with watery lentils, calling it strength disguised as survival. Each night, I read Father's old notes, trying to hear his calm again. "Purpose is heavier than grief," he once said. I whispered it like prayer, but prayers need answers, and mine refused to arrive. Weeks bled into months, and I shrank into the rhythm of invisibility. I learned which guards kicked slower, which corners stayed dry during storms. Dock workers called me scholar, laughing because I wiped sweat before counting coins. "You read too much," one said. "Books don't lift bales, but they lift men," I replied softly, earning laughter instead of understanding. My pay barely bought shelter and tea, yet I kept the scarf folded carefully in my bag. Sometimes I dreamed of the factory, the smell of dyed thread, Father's steady hand guiding mine. Waking up hurt more than bruises ever could. Despair has texture. It rubs your soul raw until numbness starts feeling like peace. One night, the rain refused to stop, flooding alleys with floating trash and cigarette ends. I waited under a tin shed, shoes soaking, thinking about walking into the water just to stop thinking. A cry cut through the noise, sharp, urgent, human. Across the street, 2 men cornered a woman, snatching her bag as she fought back. Without thought, I ran, slipping through puddles, shouting until they fled into the dark. The woman stumbled, frightened but unbroken. "Thank you," she said, her breath visible in the cold. "You're bleeding?" she added. "Only my hands," I replied. "They're used to small wounds." She smiled faintly. "Then you're luckier than most." I didn't understand what she meant until later. We walked together under one umbrella toward the bus stand. She introduced herself as Amara Siddiq, a journalist covering labor strikes at the harbor. "You work there?" she asked. "I survived there," I said. She looked at me with the curiosity of someone who saw storylines instead of people. "Writers need readers," she said, "but I need organizers, someone who understands order." I laughed quietly. "Order lives in dreams, not docks. Maybe yours needs rescuing," she replied. Her words sat in my chest like seeds unsure about soil. Before leaving, she handed me her card. "Come tomorrow," she said. "I'll pay for your time, not your pity." Then the bus carried her into rainlight and distance. The next morning, I almost threw the card away. But hunger doesn't argue with chances. It listens. Her office sat above a bookshop, smelling like ink and possibility. "You came," she said, smiling. "Maybe by accident?" I replied. "Good," she said. "Progress often begins as an accident." She asked me to sort textile research files, hundreds of reports about local factories. I traced the familiar company names, Ewers Textiles among them. You're related? She asked, noticing my pause. I was, I said. Now I'm just educated in consequences. She didn't press further. Keep the job for a week, she said. If you hate it, at least you'll earn lunch money. That week, I fell in love with silence broken by paper. I read about machines I once repaired, wages I once miscalculated, workers I never met. Data felt like ghosts trying to tell the living what went wrong. Amara noticed my intensity. You read faster than my interns, she said. I read like I'm rebuilding something, I replied. She watched me carefully, then said, maybe you are. On Friday, she handed me an envelope, heavier than any paycheck I'd held. For the week, she said, and for teaching me that broken systems have human fingerprints. I nodded, too stunned to thank her properly. Sometimes fate whispers instead of applauding. With that money, I rented a smaller room closer to the market. The window faced a textile stall that sold leftovers, discarded threads, rejected rolls, forgotten color blends. I bought a bundle out of habit, not plan. That night, the thread tangled around my fingers like memory refusing to leave. I tied two ends together, twisting, tightening, testing. Fabric doesn't lie. It holds every mistake in its weave. I imagined patterns my brothers would mock, stitches too humble for luxury market. But humility, I realized, lasts longer than pride. The city slept loud, but I heard something beneath it, possibility breathing quietly again. Amara visited one evening, holding files under her arm. You look better, she said. Better is a luxury, I replied, smiling faintly. She placed a newspaper on my desk, an article she'd written about small weavers struggling under corporate factories. You could help me verify these stories, she said. You know their language, their pain, I corrected. Yes, she said softly, their pain. We sat near the window, two people mending different kinds of cloth. You'll get back everything they stole, she said suddenly. I don't need revenge, I murmured. Then call it repair, she said. It sounds gentler, I smiled. Maybe gentleness could win louder than rage someday. Days turned into weeks of quiet restoration. I worked mornings at the docks, afternoons in her office, evenings with thread. My hands toughened, my heart steadied. My anger began learning manners. Amara once said, most stories fail because they start with anger, not endurance. I wrote that line on my wall. The hostel manager mocked it, calling it poetry for beggars. I just smiled. Poverty is loud only until purpose starts whispering. At night, I dreamed of a loom that didn't need electricity, powered instead by patience. I woke each morning ready to build that vision from the ruins they'd left behind. One afternoon, Amara found me sketching designs on scrap paper. You ever think of making something real? She asked. Only every time I breathe, I said. Then start small, she replied. The world doesn't reward revenge, but it respects resurrection. Her words landed deep. I looked at my calloused hands and realized how far they'd already traveled, from lifting crates to lifting ideas. I nodded. Maybe it's time, I said. She smiled knowingly. Then let's begin, she whispered. And just like that, the ashes of my ruin began to take shape into fabric, into faith, into a second chance written by fate itself. Starting felt smaller than it sounded. I found an abandoned stall beside the market's back gate, its roof half missing, its walls scribbled with graffiti about promises long broken. I swept the dust, nailed an old tarp for shade, and placed 3 bundles of thread on a wooden crate. That became my counter. The first morning, not a single person stopped. By noon, even stray dogs lost interest. I brewed tea on a borrowed stove and watched other vendors shout prices like battle songs. I whispered mine instead. Recycled cloth, honest weave, low cost. A child laughed, calling it charity fabric. I smiled because he wasn't wrong. Charity begins with yourself. When Amara arrived that evening, her expression mixed disbelief and pride. You actually did it, she said. It's barely a stall, I replied. That's where truth starts, she said. Everything honest begins without walls. She helped paint a board using leftover ink from her office. It read, Ewers Threads, woven with dignity. The name felt heavy on my tongue, but right in my chest. You're using the family name? She asked. It's mine too, I said. They stole profit, not meaning. She smiled softly, understanding that revenge sometimes sounds like ownership pronounced calmly. We sat there watching sunset stretch across our imperfect handiwork, both knowing it was a beginning worth remembering. The first customers came by accident. A man selling school uniforms noticed my fabric rolls stacked neatly. Too rough for students, he said, rubbing the weave between his fingers. Too honest for buyers, I replied. He frowned, then grinned. You talk like someone who lost comfort but found backbone. Maybe both, I said. He bought a small bundle, not out of need, but curiosity. The second sale took a week. The third came after I added bright borders stitched by hand. Each coin jingled like applause, whispered through humility. Amara documented everything with her camera, saying, "Someday, these pictures will make them uncomfortable." I laughed. Good. Comfort ruins better than failure does. David's new ad appeared on a billboard across the street one morning, smiling models draped in luxury fabric, slogan shouting, "Heritage without flaws." I stared for a long time, then looked at my uneven stitches. They were full of flaws, but each carried story, breath, and redemption. "They sell perfection," I told Amara later, "but I'll sell truth." "Then truth better have patience," she said, sipping her tea. I smiled. "Truth has more stamina than greed." She nodded, half proud, half afraid for me. That night, I worked under a flickering bulb, sewing patches over fabric tiers. The bulb died before midnight, but my hands didn't stop moving. Customers started recognizing the stall by its smell: hot tea, polished metal, and damp cotton. "You fix torn cloth?" a woman asked once. "Only the kind that still wants to be fixed," I said. She brought her late husband's old shawl, threadbare and fragile as memory. I repaired it gently, breathing between stitches. When she returned, she cried softly, saying, "It feels alive again." "So do I said, before realizing the truth in it. Word spread quietly. Small orders arrived from local schools and tailors. Miral, the tea seller next door, began calling me Weaver Sob. For the first time, my name held warmth instead of pity. Amara pushed me to document my process, to write about it like a diary. "People connect to struggle," she said. "They buy honesty when it's well written." I resisted at first, claiming I wasn't a storyteller. "You already are," she said. "You just narrate in fabric instead of words." Together, we posted photos online, me mending, stitching, listening, smiling quietly beside recycled fabric. Within weeks, a few local bloggers picked it up, calling it sustainable soul work. I laughed at the fancy title, but secretly saved the screenshot. The world wasn't applauding yet, but it was starting to listen. That was enough fuel to keep weaving through exhaustion. There were bad days too. Rain soaked my stock once, ruining 2 rolls beyond repair. The landlord demanded rent early. I had none. Amara offered to pay, but pride refused mercy. Instead, I worked through nights fixing torn sails from docked boats. The sailors paid in cash and gratitude. "You patch better than the wind destroys," one said. I smiled, saying, "I've had practice." My fingers cramped until blood streaked the fabric, yet I kept going. "Rest," Amara pleaded one night. "If I rest," I said, "the silence gets louder." She nodded, leaving tea beside my lamp. Some dreams burn brighter in darkness, simply because they must. One evening, I saw a familiar car stop near the stall. James stepped out, wearing an expensive suit and a bored expression. "Caesar," he said, as if testing the sound. "Still chasing art projects? Still collecting debts?" I replied calmly. He glanced at the signboard, smirking. "You used our name." "Our father's," I corrected. "You made it meaningless. I'm giving it work." He sighed, pretending indifference. "You could have joined us again. We'd have given you something respectable." "Respect is built, not offered," I said quietly. His jaw tightened. "You'll regret this," he muttered, stepping back into the car. "Maybe," I whispered, "but I'll own every regret." After that, things changed. Orders slowed. Suppliers withdrew credit. I knew James's shadow well enough to recognize its chill. Amara slammed her notebook on the table. "He's strangling you," she said. "Let him," I replied. Fate taught me how to breathe underwater. She smiled despite anger. "You talk like a poet, but bleed like a worker. Both are in truth," I said. To survive, I began teaching young laborers basic weaving after dusk. No fee, I told them. Just promise to teach someone else someday. The room filled with laughter, mistakes, and hope. What they didn't know was that their laughter kept me alive longer than food did. When my first apprentice completed a full roll alone, I almost cried. "You did it," I said. "No, we did," he replied. His pride reminded me of father showing me my first thread. Amara filmed the moment quietly, saying, "This is your first victory." "No," I said softly. "This is my first echo." She looked confused, and I explained. "They silenced me once, but echoes don't need permission." That night, I walked home past my old family billboard, still shining but empty to me. My reflection appeared on the glass window, half shadow, half light. I smiled. Fate was already sharpening its pen for my next chapter. Growth never arrives with applause. It creeps in wearing ordinary clothes. Mornings began before the sun, the market still asleep, the street lamps flickering like uncertain promises. I opened my stall quietly, dusting the counter, aligning fabric rolls with reverence. Each piece held fingerprints from yesterday's labor, memories of tired laughter and unspoken prayers. Miral brought steaming tea, saying, "You work like time owes you money." I smiled. Maybe it does. My hands no longer trembled when cutting cloth. They remembered, adapted, obeyed. Amara would drop by with her notepad, teasing, "You've stopped chasing survival. Now you're courting it." I liked that. Survival, when loved, turns into purpose disguised as routine. By mid-year, the stall no longer looked temporary. Naveed, my young apprentice, painted the wood panels blue and white. "Looks like a real shop now," he said proudly. "It is one," I replied, just slower at believing it. The alley filled with noise from other vendors, but ours stayed calm. Customers came steady, not in crowds, but in trust. Old workers brought uniforms to repair. Mothers brought heirloom shawls. "You sew emotion," one woman said. "They pay better than wages," I answered. Amara smiled at that, scribbling it in her notes. "Someday," she said, "you'll quote your own wisdom to others." "Only if wisdom pays rent," I joked, earning her soft laughter. The city began whispering about the brother who worked with honesty. Some mocked me, others grew curious. A local blogger published an article calling my shop a rebellion stitched in silence. James must have read it because within days, one of his suppliers canceled my thread orders. I expected the setback and smiled through it. Amara fumed, saying, "He's terrified of your quiet." "Good," I replied. "Noise forgets faster than silence." She shook her head but admired my calm. We found a smaller supplier, older, slower, but loyal. Each roll arrived like a heartbeat restored. I realized growth isn't measured by numbers, but by what still refuses to die. Nights were for learning. I borrowed library books on fabric dyeing, textile chemistry, and small business ethics. The librarian once said, "You study like your life depends on it." It already did, I said, smiling. Amara joined sometimes, bringing tea, helping me underline terms I barely understood. We'd laugh about definitions like supply chain transparency, turning jargon into poetry. "Transparency means they'll see what they did to you," she teased. "No," I said. "It means they'll see what I became, despite them." That line stayed with her. She quoted it in her next column. The world slowly began knowing my name again, but this time through merit, not pity. As months passed, our small team grew. Naveed recruited 2 friends from the docks, eager to learn weaving. I paid them fairly, splitting profits rather than hiding them. "You'll go broke like this," Miral warned. "Or build loyalty stronger than money," I countered. Within weeks, loyalty won. We experimented with natural dyes made from marigolds and indigo leaves. The smell of earth filled the shop, wrapping hardship in warmth. One evening, Amara arrived early and whispered, "This place feels alive." "That's because we stopped chasing revenge," I said. "We're weaving respect instead." She looked at me long enough to know I meant every syllable. Business improved, but pride remained cautious. I refused large offers that smelled like exploitation disguised as opportunity. "You're stubborn," Amara said once. "No," I replied. "I'm allergic to shortcuts." She laughed. "That line belongs in a book." "Then write it," I said, smiling. She did. Her article, "The Fabric of Integrity," published that month, spread faster than gossip. The piece painted me not as a victim, but as proof that dignity still sells. Customers began visiting from other districts, curious about the handmade miracle behind the stall. Even David's managers tried buying fabric under fake names. I sold to them politely, then smiled at the irony. One rainy afternoon, Amara showed me a letter, an invitation to speak at a sustainability forum. "They want you," she said. "Me?" I laughed. "I fix torn shawls. I don't give speeches." "You fix more than shawls," she insisted. "You fix belief." The letter felt heavy in my hand, like fate folding another test into my story. "If I go," I said, "I'll speak as a worker, not a hero." "Then you'll say what heroes never do," she replied. I went. My hands shook at the podium, but my voice found rhythm halfway through. When I finished, the applause sounded like forgiveness, learning to make noise again. After the forum, orders tripled overnight. We barely kept up with demand, stitching through exhaustion. "This is good trouble," Naveed said, grinning. "It's growth disguised as chaos," I replied. Amara suggested moving to a larger space. I hesitated. "This alley gave me life," I said. "I won't abandon it." So, we expanded vertically, added a loft for training and storage. The walls stayed rough, the floors creaked, but everything breathed truth. Customers liked that. "You built an empire from scratches," one journalist said. "No," I corrected gently. "I built peace from noise." He didn't print that part, but I think he understood. Some nights, I sat on the rooftop, watching city lights blink like cautious stars. I thought of James and David, wondering if success felt hollow when bought. Do you still hate them? Amara asked once. No, I said. Hate needs too much maintenance. Then what drives you now? Gratitude, I answered, and the fear of becoming them. She smiled, calling me a philosopher trapped in cotton. Maybe she was right. My revenge had already transformed, no longer about winning, but about restoring the balance they broke. Fate, it seemed, was still measuring quietly, waiting for its perfect symmetry to appear. One morning, I received an official envelope, an invitation to a national exhibition honoring small innovators. They finally noticed, Amara said. I read the list of awardees. My name sat among giants. You'll have to wear a suit, she teased. Then I'll borrow one from the dock workers, I replied. She laughed, then paused. You know they'll be there too. James and David? I asked. She nodded. Then maybe fate's done whispering, I said, folding the letter neatly. The time had come, not for confrontation, but for composure. I looked at the caliper on my shelf and whispered, Measure me now, Father. I think the scales are even. The day of the exhibition smelled of rain and polish, of fresh paint and nerves hiding behind formal smiles. I wore a borrowed suit, too tight around the shoulders, but it made me stand straighter. Amara adjusted my collar like an older sister, saying, Don't look at the crowd, look at the purpose. Purpose doesn't clap, I said. No, she replied, but it remembers who stood when others laughed. The hall shimmered with gold banners and self-important. Industrialists mingled with officials. Cameras blinked like restless eyes. When the announcer called my name, Caesar Ewers, founder of Ewers Threads, time hesitated before resuming its flow. I stepped forward, slow and steady, wearing the calm I'd earned thread by thread. They handed me a crystal plaque etched with my company's name. It caught the light perfectly, scattering fragments across the hall. For sustainable craftsmanship and ethical innovation, the presenter read aloud. Applause followed, polite, practiced, but I felt something genuine beneath it. Amara clapped the loudest, her smile trembling with pride. I turned to the crowd and caught sight of them. James and David, seated near the front, both frozen mid-clap. For a heartbeat, I wanted to look away, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded slightly, a gesture neither cruel nor forgiving. The silence between us roared louder than the crowd ever could. Fate, it seemed, was watching with a satisfied smirk. After the ceremony, reporters surrounded me, asking questions about second chances and family inspiration. I spoke carefully, measuring each word like fabric before cutting. My father taught me that good fabric tells the truth, I said. You can stretch it, wash it, or wrinkle it, but it stays what it was made to be. I only followed that principle with people. Cameras flashed, pens scratched hurriedly. Somewhere near the back, I heard James scoff softly, but even his dismissal sounded weaker now. Amara whispered later, You just rewrote your family history without raising your voice. I smiled, knowing silence had been the sharpest tool all along. When the crowd thinned, James approached, expression taut. You've changed, he said. You haven't, I replied. David stood behind him, eyes darting between us. You think this award makes you our equal? James asked. I shook my head. No, I said. It proves equality was never yours to give. David sighed, saying, He always has to have the last word. Not anymore, I said quietly. Now I just let results talk. James's face flushed. Pride fought shame in his features. Enjoy your moment, he muttered. Moments make stories, I said, and stories last longer than profits. He left before his temper found new excuses. Outside the hall, rain began again, soft and deliberate. Amara handed me her umbrella. You handled them like a craftsman handles broken thread. No panic, just patience. Patience is the only wealth I own, I said. We walked toward the car, and she stopped suddenly. You know, she said, the magazine wants a cover story. They'll ask about your brothers. Then I'll tell them the truth, I replied. That they taught me what silence can build. She smiled, shaking her head. You make even revenge sound holy. Maybe it is, I said, when it stops needing applause. Rain blurred the city lights into colors of quiet triumph. The next weeks blurred into opportunity and exhaustion. Orders poured in from abroad. Our small team struggled to keep up. Naveed worked double shifts, humming old factory songs father once loved. We expanded production, bought 2 new looms, and hired 6 more workers. You've turned pain into payroll, Amara said, amazed. Pain pays well when you learn to invoice it properly, I joked. But beneath the humor, I felt gratitude simmering. The brand, Ewers Threads, became a symbol of honesty stitched into resilience. Retailers wanted interviews. Influencers wanted photos. I gave neither what they expected. We don't sell fabric, I told one reporter. We sell second chances. One morning, I received an envelope sealed with the emblem of the National Textile Council. It contained an invitation to deliver the keynote address at the annual industry gala. My hands went still. They want you to speak? Amara asked, incredulous. Yes, I said, reading the letter twice. That's the same event James sponsors every year. Then fate's done being subtle, she said, grinning. I stared out the window, the city alive with sounds I once feared. I guess it's time to speak where they once silenced me. Will you go? She asked. I have to, I replied. Some debts are settled only when spoken aloud. On preparation, I revisited the riverbank where I once slept, hungry. The same wind carried the same smells, diesel, salt, and resilience. I sat by the water and opened Father's old notebook. Pages yellowed, but steady. His handwriting curved like the rhythm of thread being pulled tight. Measure worth by contribution, not inheritance. One line read. I smiled. You knew all along, I whispered. I tore a small piece of fabric from my scarf and tied it to a branch hanging over the water. This time, I'll speak for both of us. The river shimmered like approval, and I felt lighter walking back toward tomorrow. The night of the gala arrived draped in gold and expectation. The hall gleamed with chandeliers and polished reputation. My name was printed on banners, side by side with theirs. Amara adjusted my tie and said, Speak like the man you became, not the boy they buried. I nodded. As I walked toward the stage, applause rose, not forced, but genuine. I took the microphone, scanning the crowd until I found their faces. James sat still, David beside him, their smiles faint and uneasy. Good evening, I began. I was once told that some people are unfit to lead. They were right, because leadership isn't given. It's earned through loss, failure, and quiet persistence. The hall fell silent, as if even fate held its breath. I spoke about ethics, sustainability, and the power of rebuilding with honesty. I spoke of workers who became teachers, of mistakes that became manuals. I didn't name them, but every word belonged to the brothers who had erased me. When I ended, the hall erupted in applause that sounded more like understanding than celebration. I stepped down slowly, heart steady, eyes dry. Amara whispered, That was beyond victory. No, I said softly. That was closure written in plain language. The brothers didn't move, didn't speak, just watched as I disappeared into the same world they thought they'd locked me out of forever. The gala lights dimmed into the memory of applause, but the echo stayed in my chest. Reporters buzzed around, asking for quotes, for smiles, for sound bites that could be printed without effort. I gave them all the same answer. I'm just a worker who never stopped working. It made them laugh politely, but it was true. When I finally slipped outside, the air felt freer, thinner, touched by drizzle. Amara walked beside me, her heels clicking softly on marble. They'll never forget tonight, she said. Neither will I replied, but not for the reasons they think. Somewhere inside, James and David were still sitting in that front row, processing what fate had turned into poetry. Days passed, and the world went quiet again, the way it always does after noise. The newspaper printed my speech under the headline, The Loom That Spoke Back. My stall-turned-shop became a landmark for visitors chasing inspiration. Yet, I still swept the floor myself, stitched loose hems, brewed my own tea. You could hire people for that now, Amara said. I could, I replied, but some tasks remind me not to forget who built this. She smiled knowingly. You carry your past like a badge. No, I said, like a compass. The brothers didn't reach out that week, but I knew they would. Guilt is a patient traveler. It always finds its way home. The reunion came sooner than I expected. A sleek black car stopped outside the shop one afternoon. The doors opened, and the city seemed to pause its breathing. James stepped out first, wearing his tailored suit like armor. David followed, nervous, his eyes avoiding mine. This is it, Amara whispered beside me. Yes, I said, but not the way I imagined it. They entered quietly, looking around at the shelves lined with folded fabric, the soft hum of the loom at the back. You built all this, David murmured. Yes, I said. Without help, James added, voice unreadable. Without interference, I corrected. That's not the same thing, he said. No, I replied. It's better. Customers watched awkwardly as silence stretched between us. We'd like to talk privately, James said. I nodded, leading them into the small office behind the counter. The room smelled of dye, tea, and honesty. You spoke well at the gala, David said first, forcing a smile. You sat quietly, I said. We were listening, James added. Then you finally learned something, I replied. He exhaled, tired. We were wrong, Caesar, about everything. I know, I said softly. You deserved more, he said. No, I said. I deserved respect, not more. He flinched at the word like it still burned. David's eyes filled, and he looked away. Amara brought tea, sensing the tremor in the air. Do you remember, David said, how Father used to make us weigh every roll before shipment? He said truth must always match the scale, I replied. We forgot that, James admitted. And you remembered? I nodded, silent. We lost everything, David said suddenly. The factory's shutting down, investors pulled out, workers left. They didn't leave, I said. You pushed them with greed. We thought we were protecting Father's name, James whispered. You were protecting pride, I corrected. The words landed softly, but carried weight enough to make him close his eyes. I didn't enjoy it. I just let truth stand on its own 2 feet. They asked if we could work together again, rebuild what was broken. I looked at them, their shoulders heavy, their eyes hollowed by regret. For years I imagined this moment drenched in satisfaction, but all I felt was tired compassion. Partnerships require trust, I said. Ours expired long ago. Then what do we do? David asked. Start over, I said. Without me. James stared, silent. You'd really let us fall? I didn't push you, I said. Gravity just caught up. The words silenced them. Amara watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable but proud. Sometimes mercy is refusing to lie, she said later. She was right. Truth had done the forgiving for me. After they left, the shop felt larger, lighter, filled with air that had been missing for years. Naveed peeked through the curtain. Those were your brothers? He asked. Yes, they didn't look like villains. They aren't, I said. Just men who thought love could be counted in ledgers. He nodded, half understanding, half wondering. That night, I sat with Amara on the rooftop, the city glimmering beneath us. Was it hard? She asked. No, I said, but it used to be. You didn't shout, didn't gloat, didn't fight. I didn't need to, I said. They finally saw the mirror. We sipped tea quietly, 2 witnesses to a justice that never raised its voice. The following week, James returned alone. He brought an old wooden box wrapped in brown paper. Father's sketches, he said, placing it gently on my desk. They belong with you. I opened it slowly. Blueprints, hand-drawn looms, unfinished designs. My throat tightened. Why now? I asked. Because I couldn't carry them anymore, he said. And because you'll do what we couldn't. Finish his story. I nodded, saying nothing. He lingered a moment, then whispered, I'm sorry. The words hung there, fragile but genuine. I know, I said. That's enough. He left without waiting for forgiveness. Sometimes apologies aren't meant to be received, only released. When I locked the shop that night, rain began again. It was gentle, the kind that blesses without asking. I carried Father's box upstairs, placing it beside the caliper that had measured every turning point in my life. Amara watched quietly as I unrolled the sketches. What will you do with them? She asked. Finish them, I said. Not for them, not even for him, just for peace. Peace looks good on you, she whispered. I smiled. It took years to tailor it right. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, not angry anymore, just part of the music. I looked out at the city that once buried me and realized it now sang in my name. Days after James's visit, I couldn't open Father's box without shaking. The papers smelled of dust and the faint ink of old ambition. His handwriting curved like patience, made visible. I read every note, every margin filled with quiet genius my brothers had ignored. There were designs for hand looms that wasted no thread, patterns meant to give workers rest without cutting production. Efficiency with mercy, he'd written in red ink. Those 3 words sat heavy on my chest. I realized I'd spent years building something he had already imagined. Fate, it seemed, had just chosen a slower student. Amara watched me carefully and whispered, You're not working, you're remembering. She was right. Remembering was harder. David came next, one evening when the street smelled of fresh rain and chai. He looked smaller somehow, as if regret had worn down his bones. You didn't answer my messages, he said. I had nothing left to say, I replied. Then just listen, he pleaded. I let him. He spoke of debts, of sleepless nights, of the factory closing its shutters for good. We fired people we should have protected, he admitted, eyes glassy. And the ones we trusted stole from us. I stayed silent. I kept thinking of Father's words. The cloth remembers the hands that weave it. I understand now. Do you? I asked quietly. Enough to know we unraveled everything, he said, voice breaking. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small roll of fabric, rough, uneven, barely holding its threads. This was our last production, he said. I wanted you to see what greed looks like when it runs out of soul. I touched the cloth. It was lifeless, colorless, made without care. You see it? David asked. I see truth, I said. It always shows through weak thread. He laughed softly, tears escaping. We used to call you sentimental, he said. Now I call it wisdom. I handed the fabric back. Keep it, I said. Let it remind you what forgetting costs. He nodded, bowed slightly, and left without waiting for forgiveness. I think he knew it was already there. That night, I sat by the open window, the air cool and honest. Amara came with tea, quiet as usual. They're both learning, she said. Yes, I replied. But the exam's over. Then maybe this is revision, she said. I smiled. Redemption never has deadlines. We watched the rain blur streetlights into gentle halos. Does it feel complete? She asked. No, I said. Completion isn't peace, it's acceptance. She nodded, understanding more than I said aloud. The city hummed below, unaware of how softly forgiveness works. It doesn't declare, it dissolves. I placed the caliper on the table, its metal cold and kind, and thought of Father smiling through quiet pride somewhere unseen. A week later, James returned, dressed simply, eyes stripped of ego. He looked at the workers sorting fabric, nodding at their greetings like a man learning humility. You were right, he said, about everything. I didn't need to be, I replied. I just needed to be honest. He sat across from me, hands trembling. I keep hearing your speech, he confessed. It won't leave my head. Then maybe it's finally working, I said. He smiled faintly. You never took revenge, Caesar. You just healed better. Healing was revenge, I said. It lasted longer. He laughed quietly through his guilt, a sound both broken and human. We thought strength was shouting, he said. You proved it whispers. We walked through the workshop together, his eyes lingering on each loom. You built everything Father wanted, he said. No, I answered. I built what he taught, something that remembers kindness. Can we help? He asked. You already are, I said, by learning what help actually means. He looked down, voice small. Mother wants to see you. Then she should come when she's ready, I said. I'm not hiding anymore. He nodded, swallowing emotion. You were the youngest, he said, but you carried the heaviest. Maybe that's why I walked slower, I said, so I wouldn't drop it. He smiled at that, the kind of smile that carries relief instead of defense. Later that day, I received a message from David, just one sentence. Thank you for not becoming us. I stared at it for a long time, unsure if it was apology or confession, maybe both. Amara read it over my shoulder and said, that's their peace offering. Then I accept, I said quietly. Without conditions, without expectation. You're better than them, she said. No, I replied. Just luckier. I lost everything early enough to rebuild it, right? She smiled, eyes glistening. You talk like someone who's finished the story. No, I said. I just stopped writing in anger. She nodded slowly, as if memorizing the line. That evening, we reopened the old sketches and completed one of Father's designs. Naveed and the others watched, fascinated, as the loom moved with new rhythm. The pattern emerged clean, symmetrical, almost divine. Looks like something sacred, Naveed said. It is, I answered. It's forgiveness, woven by hand. The cloth gleamed under soft light, its colors deep and calm. Send it to them, Amara suggested. With no note, no name. They'll know, I said. And if they don't, then it will teach them quietly. We rolled the fabric carefully, packed it, and sent it by courier the next morning. I didn't ask for confirmation. Peace never needs proof of delivery. Days turned into stillness, the kind that doesn't demand attention. The brothers didn't visit again, and I didn't expect them to. Sometimes healing means staying away from what once made you small. The workers hummed softly, looms clicking like heartbeats. Amara smiled at the calm, saying, your story finally sounds finished. No, I said. It's simply resting. And what comes after rest? She asked. Reflection, I replied. She grinned. Then I'll bring the tea. The caliper clicked once, as if agreeing. Outside, the sky stretched open, clouds parting like curtains before a quiet finale. Fate had written its final word, but I still had mine to speak. The workshop breathed softly that morning, like a chest after a long run, finally finding rhythm. Sunlight came in through cracked glass, warm and forgiving, resting on the looms as if blessing them. The air smelled of dye and peace. I poured tea into chipped cups, one for myself, one for the memory of Father. His sketches lay spread across the desk, the last design finally complete. Every line felt like closure, disguised as creation. Amara arrived early, her eyes smiling before her lips did. You've been awake since dawn again, she said. Sleep's overrated, I replied. Peace isn't, she countered. I laughed softly. Then maybe I've been awake inside peace. And for the first time, it was true. The workers arrived, joking, carrying bread, filling the air with chatter. Naveed hung new fabric samples on the wall, proud as a man unveiling a masterpiece. Looks perfect, I said. Perfect's boring, he replied, grinning. You taught us flaws make fabric breathe. They do, I said. So keep them visible. Amara watched the exchange, shaking her head. You turned them into poets, she said. No, I answered. Just honest men. She smiled. Honest men are rare. That's poetry enough. Her words hung in the air like sunlight refusing to fade. I realized then that success wasn't the applause of strangers. It was the laughter of those who built alongside you. Around noon, I took the bus toward Mother's house. The city outside the window looked different now, smaller somehow, softer around its edges. The same roads that once felt cruel now carried calm, like old wounds healing in slow motion. When I reached the gate, she was already waiting. Her eyes filled before I even spoke. "You look like him," she whispered. "I had good practice," I said. Inside, the house smelled the same. Lemongrass, furniture polish, and memory. On the table sat tea for 3. "They'll come soon," she said. "I know," I replied. She touched my hand. "Forgive them," she said, "even if they don't ask again." "Maybe I already did," I said. "I just didn't tell them." James arrived first, dressed simply, carrying none of his usual armor. David followed, holding a small potted plant awkwardly, like peace wrapped in soil. "We didn't come for business," James said. "Then stay," I replied. Mother poured tea in silence. The room filled with words none of us needed to say. "You were right about everything," David whispered. "No," I said. "I was just stubborn enough to prove it." They laughed, weakly, grateful. James cleared his throat. "We want to invest in rebuilding the factory, not as owners, but as learners." I looked at them, at the faces that once threw me into the cold. "Then start where I did," I said. "At the loom, not the ledger." They nodded. For once, pride stayed quiet. Later, we stood in the courtyard. The rain began again, thin and kind. The same rain that had once carried my vows into the night. "You remember that day?" James asked softly. "Every detail," I said. "So, do I," he replied, "but differently now." David added, "We thought we buried you that night." "You did," I said, "but the soil was good." They laughed through the ache, understanding without defense. I looked up at the gray sky and thought how strange mercy was. It never shouted. It just waited until hearts were ready. "We can't undo it," James said. "No," I replied, "but we can stop pretending it didn't happen." And for the first time, their eyes didn't drop. That evening, back at the workshop, Amara waited with dinner on a single plate, still steaming. "You saw them," she said. "Yes, and they're learning to bend without breaking." "So are you," she said softly. I smiled, sitting beside her. "You ever think fate just wanted to see if I'd survive the test?" "Maybe fate just wanted to write a better ending," she replied. "One where you didn't need revenge to feel complete." I nodded. Maybe revenge was never the story. Maybe it was just the spark to begin it. She looked at me for a long time, her expression gentle and certain. "You won without fighting," she said. "Then it wasn't war," I answered. "It was repair." When everyone left, I stayed behind, lights low, hands resting on the loom. The caliper sat on the desk, still and faithful. I picked it up and turned it slowly, the metal reflecting the soft hum of life around me. "You measured everything, didn't you, Father?" I whispered. "Loss, love, labor, all of it." The caliper clicked once, as if answering. "You'd like what became of us," I said quietly. The workshop felt alive, breathing with memory, the air full of promise. I realized then that fate hadn't given me the final word. It had given me something far better, the voice to write my own. The next morning, I returned to the riverbank, where everything once ended and began. The same wind danced over the water, carrying the scent of rust and redemption. I stood there, watching reflections ripple, thinking about the boy who'd once stood here with nothing but a vow. "You kept it," I whispered to him. Every word. The river didn't answer, but it didn't need to. Its flow was the proof. I closed my eyes and felt gratitude instead of grief, clarity instead of bitterness. Some endings don't explode, they exhale. I walked away slowly, footprints fading behind me, the horizon wide open ahead. If this story touched you, please like and share. And tell me, should I forgive my brothers completely, or let silence keep the peace I've built?